Judge laughs at crying veteran in court, but has no idea who's about to walk in. Judge laughs at crying veteran in court, but has no idea who's about to walk. In the courtroom fell silent as Judge Hamilton mocked the trembling veteran. Little did he know the doors were about to swing open, revealing someone whose presence would change everything forever. The imposing marble columns of the Jefferson County Courthouse cast long shadows across the polished floor. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dancing dust particles in the stale air that smelled of old wood paper and anxiety. The hard wooden benches were filled with the day's cases, some hopeful, others resigned to their fate. The sharp tap of Judge Richard Hamilton's gavel punctuated the hushed murmurs like thunder in a quiet sky. In the defendant's chair sat Michael Winters, a 42-year-old veteran, with shoulders now hunched forward, a stark contrast to the proud military posture he once maintained. His weathered hands, calloused from 3 tours in Afghanistan, trembled slightly as they rested on the table. The dark circles under his eyes told of sleepless nights haunted by memories he couldn't escape. His once pressed clothes now hung loosely on his frame, evidence of the toll recent months had taken. Before joining the military, Michael had been the pride of his small hometown quarterback honor student and volunteer firefighter. The war had changed him, leaving invisible wounds that ran deeper than the shrapnel scars on his left leg. Yet, despite the PTSD that plagued him, Michael had maintained one remarkable quality: his unwavering loyalty to those who served alongside him. It was this loyalty that had landed him in court today. The charge was simple, but serious trespassing and disturbance of peace. Michael had been arrested outside the home of a local politician who had promised to support a veterans' health care bill, but then voted against it at the last minute. The bill would have funded a specialized PTSD treatment center in their county, something desperately needed by Michael and dozens of other veterans in the area. His protest, though passionate, had remained nonviolent, but the influential politician had pressed charges nonetheless. What made matters worse was Judge Hamilton's reputation, known for his harsh sentences and unsympathetic demeanor. He had never served in the military and was rumored to have avoided the draft in his youth. The courthouse regulars exchanged knowing glances. A veteran with PTSD facing Judge Hamilton was like sending a lamb to slaughter. Case number 47293. Michael Winters charged with criminal trespassing and disturbing the peace, announced the court clerk in a monotone voice. Michael rose slowly, his bad leg stiff from sitting. His court-appointed attorney, Sarah Chin, a young lawyer just 2 years out of law school, stood beside him. She had been assigned his case just yesterday and had spent the night reviewing his file and military record. "Your Honor," Sarah began, "my client pleads not guilty. Mr. Winters is a decorated veteran who served 3 tours in Afghanistan. His actions, while perhaps misguided, were motivated by a desperate need for mental health services promised to veterans like himself." Judge Hamilton peered over his glasses, his expression a mixture of boredom and contempt. "Ms. Chin, this court doesn't award special privileges for career choices. Your client disturbed a public official at his private residence. The law applies equally to everyone." Sarah felt her heart sink, but pressed on. "We request leniency based on Mr. Winters' service record and his current health situation. He suffers from severe PTSD and..." Yes, yes, the judge interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. Everyone has problems, counselor. The court has a full docket today. Michael, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Your Honor, I just wanted him to look me in the eye and tell me why he changed his vote. 22 veterans commit suicide every day in this country. I've lost 4 friends from my unit already. To everyone's shock, Michael's voice cracked and tears began streaming down his face. I'm not asking for myself anymore. I'm asking for the guys who didn't make it home. The courtroom fell silent, but only for a moment, before Judge Hamilton let out a short, derisive laugh. Mr. Winters, save the theatrics for Veterans Day parades. This is a court of law, not a therapy session. Several gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the bailiff looked uncomfortable. Michael's face flushed with shame as he tried to compose himself. It was at this moment that Sarah made a bold decision. Your Honor, before you proceed with sentencing, I'd like to introduce a character witness for Mr. Winters, someone who can speak to his service and character. Judge Hamilton sighed dramatically. Fine. You have 5 minutes, Ms. Chin. Not a second more. Sarah quickly stepped to the back of the courtroom and opened the heavy wooden doors. She whispered to someone waiting outside, then returned to her place beside Michael, who looked at her with confusion. He hadn't been told about any character witness. The defense calls Colonel James Harrington, Sarah announced clearly. The courtroom doors swung open, and a tall man in full military dress uniform entered, his chest adorned with numerous medals, including the Distinguished Service Cross. He walked with the unmistakable confidence of a senior military officer. But what caught everyone's attention was not just his impressive appearance, it was the fact that he was using a prosthetic leg visible beneath his uniform pants. As Colonel Harrington made his way to the witness stand, a murmur spread through the courtroom. Judge Hamilton's smug expression faltered slightly. Colonel Harrington was sworn in, his voice resonating through the courtroom with authority that commanded respect. Michael stared in disbelief. He hadn't seen his former commanding officer since their unit had been hit by an IED 6 years ago. Colonel Harrington, Sarah began, could you please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant, Michael Winters? The colonel nodded. Staff Sergeant Winters served under my command during 2 tours in Afghanistan. On April 17, 2016, our convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device. 3 men died instantly. He paused, his composure momentarily shaken. I was trapped in the lead vehicle, which had caught fire. The courtroom was utterly silent now. Even Judge Hamilton had stopped shuffling papers. Despite being injured himself, Sergeant Winters ran through enemy fire to reach my vehicle. He pulled me out seconds before the fuel tank exploded. He then carried me over half a mile to the extraction point, all while under sporadic enemy fire. Colonel Harrington looked directly at Michael. I lost my leg that day, but I kept my life because of this man. Michael kept his eyes down, uncomfortable with the praise. The memories of that day, the heat of the flames, the weight of his commander's body, the certainty that they wouldn't make it, came flooding back. Judge Hamilton cleared his throat. While this is certainly commendable, Colonel, I fail to see how Mr. Winters' military service excuses his criminal behavior years later. The colonel's eyes hardened. Your Honor, I'm not finished. After returning home, Sergeant Winters established a peer support group for veterans in this county. Using his own disability payments, he rented a small space where veterans could meet weekly. Over the past 4 years, this informal group has helped dozens of veterans transition to civilian life. Sarah produced a folder. Your Honor, I'd like to submit these letters from local veterans who credit Mr. Winters with saving their lives through his support group. As the bailiff delivered the folder to the judge, whispers spread through the courtroom. Several people in the gallery nodded in recognition, family members of veterans who had benefited from Michael's work. Judge Hamilton reluctantly accepted the folder, but barely glanced at its contents. Again, commendable community service, but there's more, Your Honor. Colonel Harrington interrupted something few people dared to do to Judge Hamilton. When the Veterans Affairs Office in this county was understaffed last winter, Mr. Winters volunteered 40 hours a week to help process backlogged benefits claims. He did this while working nights as a security guard to pay his rent. A woman in the back of the courtroom stood up. That's true, Your Honor. I work at the VA office. Michael helped clear a 3-month backlog in just 6 weeks. Dozens of veterans received their benefits because of him. Judge Hamilton banged his gavel. Sit down. Outbursts will not be tolerated in my courtroom. The woman sat, but the impact of her words remained. More people in the gallery were now looking at Michael with newfound respect. A reporter from the local newspaper had slipped in and was taking notes furiously. Colonel Harrington continued, his voice steady. Your Honor, the politician Mr. Winters confronted had personally promised him in a meeting I also attended that he would support the Veterans Health Care Bill. This bill would have provided specialized PTSD treatment that the VA currently doesn't offer in this region. When the politician changed his vote without explanation, he betrayed not just Michael, but hundreds of veterans in this county. Judge Hamilton's face had grown increasingly red. Colonel, this court does not try politicians for broken promises. We are here to address Mr. Winters' actions, which broke the law. With all due respect, Your Honor, the colonel replied, sometimes context matters. Mr. Winters didn't threaten anyone. He stood on a public sidewalk with a sign asking for an explanation. Is that really a crime deserving of jail time? Just as the tension in the courtroom reached its peak, the doors swung open again. All heads turned to see a group of people entering, men and women of various ages, some in wheelchairs, others with visible prosthetics, and some with no visible injuries at all. They filed in silently, filling the back of the courtroom. Each wore a simple black t-shirt with white lettering that read, Veterans Stand Together. Judge Hamilton banged his gavel repeatedly. What is the meaning of this interruption? Bailiff, remove these people immediately. The bailiff hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the order to remove a group of veterans from a public courtroom. Sarah quickly intervened. Your Honor, these individuals have a right to observe public court proceedings. They're not disrupting anything. Before the judge could respond, the courtroom doors opened once more. This time, an elderly man in a wheelchair entered, pushed by a middle-aged woman. The man wore a World War II veteran's cap adorned with several pins. Colonel Harrington immediately stood at attention, as did Michael and several others in the courtroom who recognized the elderly man. Who is that? Judge Hamilton demanded, his composure clearly shaken. The court clerk leaned over and whispered something to the judge. The color drained from Hamilton's face. The elderly man was wheeled to the front of the courtroom. The woman pushing his wheelchair addressed the court. Your Honor, my father, retired Major General Robert Hamilton, requested to be present for this hearing. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge's own father, a decorated WWII veteran and respected military leader, had come to court. Judge Hamilton's hands trembled slightly. "Father, this is highly irregular. I'm in the middle of proceedings." The elderly man's voice was weak but clear. "Richard, I raised you better than this." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Judge Hamilton looked as though he'd been slapped. Major General Hamilton continued, "When I fought at Normandy, I wasn't fighting for a country where veterans would be mocked in courtrooms, especially not by my own son." The judge's face flushed with shame. "Father, you don't understand the legal. I understand right and wrong." The elderly man interrupted, "And I understand loyalty. This young man," he gestured toward Michael, "showed loyalty to his country and his comrades. Where is your loyalty, Richard?" In that moment, Judge Hamilton seemed to shrink in his chair. The powerful, arrogant man who had laughed at a veteran's tears just an hour ago now looked like a chastised child. Colonel Harrington seized the moment. "Your Honor, no one here is asking for the charges to be dismissed simply because Mr. Winters is a veteran. We're asking for understanding of the context and for a sentence that reflects both the nature of the offense and the character of the man who committed it." Judge Hamilton called for a 15-minute recess, during which he disappeared into his chambers. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. Michael sat quietly still, processing the unexpected appearance of both his former commander and the judge's father. Sarah leaned close to Michael. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Colonel Harrington. I wasn't sure he would make it in time." Michael shook his head in disbelief. "How did you even find him?" "I stayed up researching your military record last night. When I saw his name as your commanding officer, I tracked him down through veterans networks. He was at a conference 3 hours away and drove here as soon as I called." Michael's eyes welled with tears again, but this time from gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. When court resumed, Judge Hamilton returned with a noticeably different demeanor. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by a subdued, almost contemplative expression. "Before I render my decision," he began, "I'd like to hear directly from Mr. Winters." Michael stood slowly, supported by Sarah. "Mr. Winters, can you explain in your own words why you felt it necessary to confront Senator Davis at his home?" Michael took a deep breath. "Your Honor, when you've held your buddy while he bleeds out in a foreign country, you make promises. I promised my dying friends I'd look out for the ones who made it back. When Senator Davis promised to support that bill, I told dozens of veterans help was coming. Men and women who are hanging by a thread, who need specialized care the local VA can't provide." Michael's voice grew stronger. When he changed his vote without explanation, it wasn't just politics to us. For some, it was a death sentence. I didn't go there to threaten or harass him. I just wanted an explanation I could give to the veterans who had been counting on that treatment center." Judge Hamilton nodded slowly. "And the sign you were carrying, what did it say?" "It said, 'Keep your promise. Veterans are dying waiting.' Nothing threatening, sir. Just the truth." The judge was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Winters, the law is clear about trespassing. However, the court also has discretion in how to apply that law." He paused, looking briefly at his father, who sat watching intently from his wheelchair. "I am finding you guilty of trespassing, as you were indeed on private property." Michael's shoulders slumped, but the judge continued, "However, given the circumstances and your previously clean record, I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation and 100 hours of community service." A murmur of relief spread through the courtroom, but Judge Hamilton raised his hand for silence. "Your community service will be fulfilled by continuing and expanding your veteran support group, which I'm now recognizing as an official court-approved program. Furthermore," he added, looking directly at the reporter in the gallery, "this court strongly encourages Senator Davis to meet with Mr. Winters and other veteran representatives to discuss the promised health care facility." The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel once, but without his earlier aggression. "Additionally," Judge Hamilton continued, when the noise subsided, "I am personally donating $10,000 to establish a fund for the Veteran Support Group, and I encourage others who are able to contribute as well." Michael stood in shock, unable to process the complete reversal of his fortunes. Judge Hamilton made one final statement. "This court stands adjourned, and Mr. Winters, thank you for your service." The story of what happened in Judge Hamilton's courtroom that day spread quickly. By evening, it was the lead story on local news, and by the next day, national outlets had picked it up. The image of Major General Hamilton confronting his son in defense of a veteran resonated deeply across the country. Senator Davis, facing intense public pressure, not only met with Michael, but also reintroduced the Veterans Health Care Bill with additional funding. 6 months later, ground was broken on the new PTSD treatment center, with Michael cutting the ribbon alongside Colonel Harrington. Judge Hamilton underwent a transformation that surprised many. In the legal community, he established a veterans treatment court in the county, one of the first in the state providing alternatives to incarceration for veterans whose crimes were connected to PTSD or other service-related issues. He regularly invited veterans to speak to law students about the challenges of reintegration. The fund he started for Michael's support group grew to over $300,000 through community donations, allowing them to secure a permanent location and hire professional counselors to supplement the peer support. The program became a model for other communities across the country. 1 year after the courtroom confrontation, Michael stood before a crowd at the grand opening of the treatment center. The nightmares hadn't stopped completely, and he still jumped at loud noises, but there was a new steadiness to his hands and clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "When I came home from Afghanistan, I felt like I'd left the best parts of myself behind," Michael told the assembled crowd, which included veterans, community members, and several politicians. "I was fighting a different kind of war here, one against memories, against a system that seemed designed to forget us, and against my own mind." He gestured to the modern facility behind him, with its welcoming entrance and thoughtfully designed spaces. "This center represents more than just treatment. It represents recognition, acknowledgement that the wounds we carry home aren't always visible, but they're just as real." In the front row sat Judge Hamilton beside his father, the Major General, now frailer, but still commanding respect with his presence. The judge's transformation had been perhaps the most unexpected outcome of that fateful day in court. He had become an outspoken advocate for veterans' issues within the judicial system, frequently consulting with Michael on how courts could better serve those who had served their country. Senator Davis, who had once pressed charges against Michael, now stood nearby as a supporter of the center, though the wariness in Michael's eyes when they spoke suggested some wounds heal more slowly than others. Colonel Harrington had relocated to the area to serve as the center's director, bringing his medical expertise and first-hand understanding of combat trauma to the role. Under his leadership, the center had already begun innovative programs combining traditional therapy with peer support and community integration. The most profound changes, however, were evident in the lives of individual veterans. A young woman who had attempted suicide twice after returning from Iraq now worked as a peer counselor. A former Marine who had been living in his car was now housed and employed. Veterans who had been isolated were finding community, and those who had been silent about their suffering were finally finding their voices. As Michael concluded his speech, he locked eyes with Sarah Chen, who had continued to volunteer legal services to veterans in need. "Someone once told me that context matters," he said, nodding to her with gratitude. "The context of our pain matters. The context of our service matters. And most importantly, the context of our community, how we stand together, matters most of all." The crowd rose in a standing ovation as Michael stepped back from the podium. Judge Hamilton approached him, extending his hand. "My father always says that true courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what's right, despite your fear," the judge said quietly. "You taught me that lesson in my own courtroom." Michael accepted the handshake. "And you taught me that people can change your honor. Sometimes they just need the right person to walk through the door." That evening, as the sun set over the new treatment center, Michael sat alone on a bench outside watching the golden light fade. A text message lit up his phone, a veteran in crisis reaching out to the support line Michael still personally monitored. Without hesitation, he answered the call just as someone had once answered his. "You're not alone, brother," Michael said into the phone, his voice steady and sure. "And trust me when I say this, things can change in ways you'd never expect. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to show up even when your hands are shaking." As he spoke these words to a stranger in need, Michael realized they were the same words he now believed about himself. The trembling veteran who had stood in that courtroom a year ago had found not just his voice, but his purpose. And in doing so, he had changed not only his own life, but countless others. The courthouse, where he had once faced judgment, now stood as just another building. In a community that had learned to see its veterans with new eyes, not as problems to be solved or cases to be processed, but as valuable members whose experiences, both painful and powerful, made them not broken, but essential. Sometimes justice wears a robe, and sometimes it wears combat boots, Michael thought as he continued his conversation with the veteran on the phone. But it always requires someone brave enough to stand up when others sit down. And in that moment, as one veteran reached out to another across the invisible bridges of shared experience, the true verdict was clear. No one who serves should ever stand alone.